Okay, so I'm back. So, what we had is because the regulations to reduce the requirements, the minimum requirements to purchase homes were reduced so dramatically, millions of households purchased homes in the early 2000s. Okay? And the demand for housing just skyrocketed. Construction companies started building many more homes. Developers got involved. And the construction business just skyrocketed as these new homes are being built and also purchased. So, if you look at, I'll take this little back scratcher. If you look at housing prices on the vertical axis and then years on the horizontal axis, if you look from 1980 to 2000, there was a slight rise in housing prices. The economy was growing and housing prices increased at a relatively low rate. But then, when all the regulations and minimum requirements to borrow money to buy a home were reduced, housing demand skyrocketed, and housing prices in the early 2000s skyrocketed. Okay? So that should have been a warning, but a lot of economists were asleep at the switch, and I think my profession gets an F for this period of time to realize that there was going to be a problem, because historically housing prices were growing at a pretty slow rate, but in the space of 3 or 4 years housing prices were just skyrocketing. So, and that's because people would be eligible to buy these homes, and it made it real easy. So what happened was, when after a bank completed a loan to purchase a house, okay, the bank would then sell that loan. So the bank would make the profit off the loan, and then they would sell the loan, and these loans would be, there could be 2 million of these loan contracts all put together in something called a derivative. And these derivatives were put together, and then they were sold to large financial institutions like Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, Morgan Stanley, and Goldman Sachs. So these large institutions would purchase a derivative where there'd be 1 million loans, and they would make the money off the mortgage payments that were occurring each month. So the bank who initiated the loan would make their profit, they'd sell the loan, and then all these large financial institutions would purchase these loans in a bundle, and again, they're called derivatives. Now, also going on there was people were speculating in the housing market. They would say, you know what, let me buy a home since housing prices are skyrocketing. Let's buy a home here, and I'll wait a year and then sell it for a profit. So, besides individual homeowners getting into a home for the first time, speculators were buying houses, expecting it to hold it for a year and then sell it for a much higher price a year from now, since housing prices were skyrocketing. The problem with this was those adjustable rate mortgages we talked about in the last lecture. Okay? Because as the years went on, the adjustable rate mortgage would expire, and then the loan would be renegotiated at a much higher interest rate. And those people who had bought the homes were unable to afford the higher interest rate because your mortgage payments would increase substantially. So, all the derivatives that Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers purchased were becoming less valuable because the loans themselves became unstable, because the individuals who had originally borrowed the money were no longer able to purchase maintain their payments in their homes, because the adjustable rate mortgage evaporated and interest rates increased substantially, and their monthly mortgage payments increased to such a large amount that a lot of these homeowners could not afford to live in their homes. So what happened was, a lot of people who owned a home for 2 years would just walk away from it. They would move out, get an apartment for a much lower rate, and leave the house vacant. So all these derivatives that Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers had purchased were now worth much less money than they anticipated, because a lot of these loans could not be guaranteed. So, Bear Stearns, which people have probably heard of, was $1 billion financial institution. They went bankrupt. Also, Lehman Brothers, which you probably never heard of, they also went bankrupt because they had purchased billions of dollars of these derivatives, and they were worth much less than they anticipated. So, now, Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, those financial institutions did survive. So, things got so bad that Barry Paulson, who was the Secretary of Treasury, he needed money to bail out a lot of the banks and financial institutions that were running short of cash, because there was a concern that if the federal government did not loan these financial institutions money, that the ATMs all across the country would literally have no money in it. So if you went to your ATM to withdraw $100, the $100 would not be there. So what happened was we got this huge financial crisis, because a lot of these large financial institutions are going bankrupt, and they had a lot of investors in these companies, and these investments just plummeted to zero. And a lot of people's investments were reduced substantially, and there was this tremendous financial crisis. A lot of people lost a large part of their savings, and which would hurt them in retirement. So the financial crisis hits firm in 2007 and 2008, and then when people started moving out of their homes, housing prices dropped like a rock. Okay, they increased real quickly, but then they fell just as quickly. And so all these homes that were purchased at a high price up here were now valued at a very low price there, and people were losing fortunes of money. So the financial crisis is in full bloom now, and so it's the housing market that was the primary reason for the creation of the financial crisis or Great Recession in 2007 and 2009. Then what's kind of amusing was Barack Obama gets elected president, and he says we have to reinvest in the economy, and he wanted an $880 billion package to bail out a lot of these financial institutions and kind of get the economy up going. The Republicans were incensed. We cannot bail out companies. We cannot bail out the economy. We're a free market system. If they went bankrupt, they go bankrupt. But fortunately, the Democrats were in power at that point, so they weren't able to pass these new laws. Okay. What's amusing now is with the Republicans in power, they've got no trouble spending $3 trillion to try to offset the impact of the COVID-19. So it depends which party's in power and what they're allowed to do, or what they maintain they can do. So this is the snapshot of the causes of the Great Recession. We'll see you in a little bit.